listening to the Viva El Birdos podcast with Jake Wood, Gabe Simons, and Scott Plaza. The Viva El Birdos podcast.
Welcome into the Viva El Birdos podcast. My name is Jake Wood, and I am your host. I am joined by fellow writer Gabe Simons here at Viva El Birdos. If you enjoy this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. We are available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all of your favorite audio streaming platforms. Today's special guest is a man who needs no introduction to Cardinals fans, but because I'm me, we're going to give him one anyway. Former writer for Birds on the Black and MLB.com, host of the lauded Prospects After Dark show, current contributor to thecardinalnation.com, and co-host of Wednesdays with Walton and Reis. Welcome back to the show, my bald brother, Kyle Reis.
Demons negotiate, but my soul only wants to levitate. Push, pull, a heaven's gate. No time to wait, gotta infiltrate.
Hi, fellas. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk it over. You guys are going to get the whole dog experience today because my little mini dachshund is 2 years old today, and she is on fire. As long as we've been talking for the lead up to this, she has been trying to nip at me and grab me, and so she's going to be a part of the show whether we like it or not.
We are a pro-Augie show here, so Aggie, not Augie, Aggie show here.
That's fine.
So, but anyway, to make Kyle feel more at home, my name is Jake Wood, and this is Brian's partner, Kyle Reis. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, guys.
It's been an exciting last couple of weeks for the St. Louis Cardinals. J.J. Wetherholt signing a long-term extension. Jordan Walker winning the home run derby. The Cardinals took a lot of exciting young talent in the amateur draft and all things that we're going to get into today with Kyle. But before we get into those topics, because Kyle is left-handed, and by old definition means he's clearly untrustworthy, yesterday was a very exciting day for all left-handers whenever Quinn Matthews, Cooper Jerpe, and Brandon Clark all displayed various reasons why Cardinals fans should be excited about what's coming up through the system. Kyle, are we inching closer to seeing some of these higher upside pitching prospects at the big league level? I know that, the Cardinals shifted Quinn Matthews to start yesterday to potentially be in line to start sometime in the next week or so because the Cardinals are now, 23 straight days or something like that without an off day. What are we about to see? Are we about to see some exciting young pitching come to the big league level?
I would suspect that in the very near future we will be seeing Quinn, not only because of the realigning, but, one way or the other after the trade deadline, there's going to be a gap in the rotation, and I would assume, because I think we can all kind of agree that Dustin May is probably going to get traded, but whether that happens or not, it is, as we're recording this, it's the 19th of July. Within the next month, there's going to be an opportunity for somebody, one of these kids, to make an impact. And outside of Hunter Dobbins, because Hunter Dobbins really is the, the elephant in the room when it comes to prospect promotions to the major leagues and the pitching staff. But I do think we'll see Quinn. And then what happens as a backfilling move to that will be really fascinating to watch, too. I am a Cooper Jerpe enthusiast, so when I get to watch Cooper Jerpe any day, I'm really fired up about it. And my interest with Cooper, even though he throws in the low 90s, he's just filthy and he throws from a weird slot and he's fun to watch. So when that's happening at the same time that Quinn Matthews, who has, he's refined his mechanics, he's back to pitching with tempo, which is he hasn't done since 2024. So he's back to pitching with tempo. He's throwing all of his stuff is moving better than it did all of last year and even at the beginning of this year. And he's gotten back to his velocity, not the high end velocity that we saw in 2024, but that mid 90s, peaking at 96, flashing close to 97 velocity. When that's going on and he's landing that changeup and he's not walking people and he's bullying righties with a slider, which is what happened last night, while Cooper Jerpe is bullying everybody with his slider and changeup, except for throwing one bad 91-mile-an-hour fastball right over the middle of the plate that a righty took to the opposite field for a home run. And then all of this was the built-up to, Brandon Clark is, by the way, throwing 103 miles an hour and a sinker profile that no lefty has ever displayed in the history of tracking sinkers in baseball. It's hard not to just soak in that excitement. All three of these pitchers have their flaws, along with all of the pitchers in the organization. There is not one near flawless pitcher. But when that's just the microcosm of what's going on in the system on any given night, it's a really exciting thing. You know, I can't think of a night all year where there hasn't been at least one or two pitchers that I've made a point to like zone in on. And it's been years since the Cardinals have had that. You might say that they probably never had it the way that they've had it right now. So it's an exciting state for the Cardinals pitching staff to be in on the farm.
Do you think, and this is obviously like up to the Cardinals, even though they're going to keep working him as a starter, that they'll try to put Cooper Jerpy in the bullpen to end this year because he can only throw so many innings anyway, and Cardinals could certainly use a lefty.
I can't wait to see how they work with Cooper Jerpy. You know, the thing that I was told is that the situation with Cooper and his future is very fluid. Basically, the success that he has or how he's flashing what he's flashing is going to end up determining what role he has. You know, I would say so far since coming off of the Tommy John, working through his rehab stint, that's been a lot of ups and downs where you could definitely see him maintaining that starter role, like getting into the starter role, but that whole, since he was drafted, the projection of it all, where people have projected him to be a reliever, it definitely seems more and more likely. I do think, and you know, with only when rosters expand in September to only two more people, it kind of makes it a little bit more muddled. But I would not be surprised if we get to September. And since he's already on the 40-man, he's one of the guys that gets the call or the cap tip if he continues to pitch this way. You know, he's up to 60 pitches right now, and we have about a month before we get, a month and a half before we get to September. And I'm anxious to see what his pitch count looks like when we get into September, because my hope is that he's on the 80-90 plan that all the other starters are on in the organization. But I would not be surprised if they're still not letting him get to 80 pitches. And at that point, I think that is the ultimate tell that he's going to be a reliever or given a chance to relieve at the major league level, probably without a chance to ever be a starter like Kyle Leahy has.
Kyle, with Cooper Jerpy specifically, and my concerns or my fears with him and them potentially pushing him a little bit too hard, obviously coming off of the arm injury, and he's never even experienced, life at the AAA level using the big league ball, and obviously we know that in itself is a transition. Would it be asking too much of him to be that potential reliever in September? Do you think it'd be like smarter long term to kind of just put the brakes on him a little in terms of like this year, because obviously he could very well just impact the team, the major league level next season, but is your opinion that they should be, all systems go forward and try to push him that quickly, or would it be smarter long term for his, development to kind of pump the brakes and allow him to at least go through some struggles at AAA and feel that and get used to pitching with that big league baseball?
Jake, I honestly think both things are right here. I think the latter, in particular, playing it slow with him would make sense, especially coming off of Tommy John, because we know that command is one of those things, takes a little extra time off Tommy John. But at the same time, I don't think the Cardinals have done, and it's a different development staff really, but I don't think the Cardinals have done Cooper Jerpy any favors by being extra careful with him over the years. I don't think that suits his personality. And quite frankly, again, I believe that he's a durable young man. I do believe that he's capable of starting. But quite frankly, like, there's only so many bullets in that arm. I think that's a fair thing to say. And I do think if you want to reap the benefits of that first-round draft pick, it would behoove you to get him to the majors as soon as possible. So, I guess you're right in thinking that you take it slow with him. And I would imagine that that's what the Cardinals will do. And that's probably the smartest thing to do. But if you're asking me what I would do, I would have him, to Gabe's question, I would have him ready to participate in September out of the Cardinals bullpen just to see what it looks like. Again, if it's a matter of building up innings for 2027, you're not going to get that. That's already out the window. So what you're trying to find out is what kind of role can he supplement for the Cardinals in 2027. At least that's what I would be doing. I don't know if that's what they're going to be doing. And in that case, yeah, I think that they would behoove them to push him a little harder this year. And honestly, if I know enough about his personality, and maybe you do need to throttle it back because of his personality, that he wants it and he's ready for it, and that's what will probably push him to the next step of his development.
And I assume he's spending August in Memphis or something like that, right? He's not just going to skip straight to the majors.
Yeah, I would think that that would be the case. Ideally, the way that my mind works, and it might not go this way, but you see Quinn Matthews make a major league debut whenever that happens, and that Cooper would backfill that role. But it could end up being Braden Davis. It's not like they don't have a couple other arms at Springfield that could backfill. But that's how I would handle it if these guys continue on their current trajectories.
So, like, at Double R, we've seen some other guys, like you mentioned, that could backfill. We've seen a couple other guys who've already made the transition from Double A to Triple A, like a Durangelo Sanja, like a Mason Molina. Obviously, there are names that are starting to filter upwards that's exciting for Cardinals fans. Another lefty who's working his way back, who should have been in Triple A for the majority of the season, is Eshawn Henderson. What's the latest with Eshawn that you've been hearing, and how soon are we from getting a potential return from him as well?
Yeah, it took him a little bit longer to get through his, rehab after his arm kerfuffle. So he's a little slower. Of course, he is pitching in the FCL, starting a rehab. I would imagine that we see him at Palm Beach very soon, very similar to how we saw Brandon Clark. And, my understanding is that they were extra careful with him. Again, pull the reins back on him a little bit to get him to a point where they wouldn't be worried about how he would respond once he got back on a mound in a competitive environment. So I would suspect, and I asked Brian about this on the last podcast with Wednesdays with Walton, is I wonder how close to like the Pete Hansen rehab he'll be, where, he made he's in the FCL, makes a couple Palm Beach appearances as a starter, and then is up to Memphis. I think that they're going to be a little slower with his rehab because of how long he's been out. The arm issue was a little bit more serious, and I don't remember what it was. My brain is malted over, so I don't remember exactly what it was, but like it was a little more serious, so they're going to be a little bit more purposeful in how they bring him along. But the last I heard is that he was healthy and ready to go, much like Brandon Clark was the other night. But not like that, because he doesn't throw 102 miles an hour. He throws like 93, and not quite as sensational as Mr. Clark does.
Can I ask about a player absolutely nobody's asking about right now, which is Thomas Ajayci, and I'm wondering how many games in Memphis you've seen. How does he look? Because his stats aren't that great, but he's walking more, striking out less, and his ex-WOBA is like way better than what his actual WOBA is, but he's got a little BAPIP, and his power's not quite there. So are you seeing like improved approach and everything from him in Memphis?
Earlier this week, I threw something out there, and it's been really, really tough to watch Victor Scott and Thomas Ajayci and Nolan Gorman at AAA, because it's just like even when things go well for them, they don't have any luck, and that's just like a lead-in with Ajayci, where he's the one of that group where you can actually see that. Like, he's taking a different at bat. It really is. He's trying as hard as to be as purposeful within his at bat as possible. You can see it. It's not, the veil is not over it. So Gabe, I think you're onto it. I think with him, I'm very much trying to make a concerted effort to build this deficiency up into something that can work for me and make it a part of my how I take an at bat. And I think that's why you've seen the home run scale back. I think he's up there trying to work counts, trying to identify pitches better, and to make it part of who he is, instead of what we heard a year ago, where it was, I'm trying to get better, and he did get better, and then he regressed to the mean. I think he's trying to make that a part of the batter he is, the hitter he is. So he's the one. And again, not to go too far off, we'll stick with Thomas Ajayci. To your point, like I do think that there's real development going on there still with him that could turn him into that utility player, similar to what we've seen out of Jose Fermin at the major league level. But I do want to just, since we're talking about it and since I brought him up, it is bad for Nolan Gorman and it is bad for Victor Scott, and it does not seem like there's any development going on. It just seems like they're churning, they're just churning in mud.
Well, from failed former prospects, in essence, to one that is taking off like a rocket, the Cardinals appear to have struck gold with J.J. Wetherholt and paid for his weight's worth in it as well, signing J.J. to an 8-year extension for $112 million. How symbolic has this season been for JJ and the Cardinals as a whole? You remember back to opening day, JJ took the first at bat of this, new era of Cardinals baseball. And now 4 months later, he's signing the first extension with the team of what Bill DeWitt III, or Triple Sticks as you refer to him as, the first of more to come. Can you speak to not only the symbolism in making JJ the first to be extended, but also who might be next in line in that conversation to be extended?
Yeah, the one of the things that I kind of point to is, I was born and raised in St. Louis City. Up until a year ago, I lived there my whole life. And in a lot of ways, J.J. Wetherholt kind of personifies that blue-collar St. Louis City, like the way he plays baseball, his personality. It's kind of perfectly personifies what goes on in St. Louis and how St. Louisans kind of view themselves. It's the hockey player mentality in a lot of ways. He's going to go out there, he's going to take his thumps, he's going to give his best effort every night. You're never going to see him, dog a ball down to first, or, he's never going to take a play off, and he's going to do it as best as he can. And to see him immediately hit the scene and be the best version of himself, and what we don't see, of course, stuff behind the scenes also lend itself to that type of personality. So it's not just for me about how it aligns with the Cardinals and their rebuild and the first at bat and the first contract extension of this new era of Cardinal baseball. I think it's also a cap tip to the city itself that this is what we're trying to build. This is what we're looking at. It's not just about first round talent. It's about what you do when you get your opportunity and how you run with it and how you work with it, the teammate you can be, the leader you are, both, in every capacity. So I think it's symbolic in that way. It's not just about the first extension of the new era. It's a cap tip to Cardinal fans in general and the city itself, but Cardinal fans in general, that this is the player, this is the attitude, this is the work ethic that we are going to build around. And also, I do think in some capacity it's a cap tip to the fans that, hey, look, we heard you. We know that you love J.J. Wetherholt, and we're going to buy out a couple years of his free agency and pay him along the way. And I really do think that kind of speaks to it. As far as who's next, I don't know. I'm after the home run derby, I was like, hey, let's just give Jordan Walker $1 billion. Well, what are we doing? 10 years, 25 years, however much he wants, just give it to him. But, I really don't know what's to come next. I know that there's been some conversation about Triple Stick's words about who might be next, or it might be the first of many. For me, that was more just rhetoric than anything else, just announcing that they're willing to be open to this stuff. Then they're leaning towards something. But I look at that roster, and for me, even though Ivan Herrera has struggled, I'd like to see what an Ivan Herrera extension would look like. I like a lot of these players, and I'm really open and excited to see what direction they go in with them. I mean, what do you guys think? Would you go Jordan Walker? What would be your next route?
Well, I'm gonna plant my flag on
Yes,
Mason Wynn. That's my. I want to sign him to an extension because I think his bat will get better at some point, despite evidence not necessarily showing it so far. But I just see some classic great defenders in the past at shortstop who got to play every day, and then eventually Dansby Swanson, Ozzie Smith, Omar Vizquel. All of those guys, their bats at some point later in their career were closer to whatever their peak was. And I think that's the case with Mason, and I would love to extend him before that happens, which is likely, if it's going to happen, while he's still in his team control years. So I'm for Mason Wynn personally, and Jordan Walker, but Mason Wynn seems like he's more affordable.
Well, I guess if I have a flag to plant, then I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going over to first baseman, big burly Alec Burleson. You talk about a guy who is consistent, professional at bat every single time, gives you impact, gives you stability. You look at not only with J.J. Wetherholt, I think the Cardinals really like to lean into certainty whenever they're extending players, whenever they're handing out big contracts. And I think that you can easily look at Alec Burleson as that 20 to 25 home run guy, probably hits in the 260 to 280 range annually. What you're gonna get. We saw a Tyler Cedarstrom get an extension this past off season, and when you look at the numbers comparatively speaking, they're very similar in their production output. So you can look at maybe a 5x75 type of extension for an Alec Burleson that will put him right around age 32, I believe, whenever that would be completed, and you buy out the rest of his arbitration plus a couple of those free agent years, I think it make all the sense in the world. You have the guy that is, like, along with Jordan Walker, leading the charge offensively. I think that Alec Burleson has, what was it last year? Ollie Marmol said after last season that no other player above Alec Burleson took advantage of the runway, the opportunity that he was given. And so I think that rewarding that, and not only J.J. Wetherholt, but also Alec Burleson, Jordan Walker, these guys who have taken meaningful steps forward in their career, and paying those guys as, like, also a message to the younger guys, like, hey, this is the carrot at the end of the stick. You take your steps forward. You achieve those positive steps forward. We will reward you with financial commitment and long-term commitment to you. So I think that there is some symbolism. There would be some symbolism in rewarding an Alec Burleson as well.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting one too. It's funny because both of those guys. The one thing about Cardinal fans being so smart is sometimes I'm speaking very much out of my own heart here. This is something that I do. I try to overthink the process, right? So people might say, "Hey, don't extend Alec Burleson because you're still kind of outside your championship window. You could get a haul for him, and wouldn't that benefit your team more?" And for me, I think one of the things I'm trying to backpedal on a little bit more is to just be like, "Yeah, that's great. But this is a player that I like to watch, who's fun to watch, who's contributing. Like, isn't that better than, in some cases, not in every case, but with Burleson in particular, and with Mason Wynn, because all of a sudden Mason Wynn is getting a lot of blowback from fans about his offensive production, and frankly, I don't think it's fair because we've seen him put up some good offensive numbers. But with both of those guys, I think that as a fan, instead of trying to be smart, instead of trying to be the GM or the president of baseball operations, I think it behoves us to kind of be like, hey, you know what? I want them to sign these guys. I want them to keep these guys around, and I want them to build around every one of these players that we've mentioned: Jordan Walker, Alec Burleson, J.J. Wetherholt, Ivan Herrera, Mason Wynn. Like, that is the core. I mean, that core also fits in your championship window. It could be the catalyst for the explosion that ends up being a championship run without sacking you financially too much into the future. So I like all of these guys, and I do hope that especially with Burleson, that's how they're looking at it, as opposed to, is this an asset that we can just turn into some other assets?
Basically, don't be the Rays.
The Cardinals don't have to be the Rays here, right? Like, they can be if they choose. Like, Lars Nootbaar, if they decide to do that, I would understand why they would move Lars Nootbaar. Dustin May, of course, like we talked. Like, be smart with the assets. I just don't think Alec Burleson is there yet, where you have to feel like he's outside of your championship window.
Fully agree. Now, to the Jordan Walker, winning the home run derby and being the first Cardinal to do so was an incredible feat, and one that was done with a lot of drama and excitement, overcoming 11 home runs in the final round to beat hometown hero Kyle Schwarber in Philadelphia. This is the Jordan Walker we were always promised, but the journey to where he is now was certainly not linear, right? What is your level of confidence, Kyle, that his performance has staying power and that his ability to continue evolving his profile can produce a potential perennial MVP candidate?
Everybody I know that is smarter than me and associated with major league teams tells me that this is for real. It's not an aberration. It's not something he's going to fall back or regress to the mean. He's going to go through stints where he is not particularly good, but that's because every Major League Baseball player goes through that. When you have conversations maybe associated with the Cardinals, they'll tell you that they believe through the coaching staff that he has kind of reached a point where he knows how to reset. And that's the key there. So I will say, like, the fan in me that has watched the Cardinals for the last 10 years and watched talent peak and then regress quickly, like, I'm not quite there where I feel like this is going to stick. But everybody I know that tells me that it is. And I trust them more than I trust myself. And I know that if this continues, it'll be the most fun we've had watching one singular player in years.
Yeah, and with Jordan Walker's home run derby, literally my attitude was, Jordan, I'm sorry, I was not familiar with your game.
Yeah.
Because I had no expectations about him in the home run derby whatsoever. I was like, because he's like a line drive hitter more, but somehow he made it I'm going to hit the line drives that just keep going until they.
Yeah.
So I was like, I didn't think that would play in the home run derby. It was like the Pools problem when he was in the home run derby. He just was too much of a line drive hitter. He couldn't like. But hey, you know what? I'm all aboard that. And also, I think as bad as he looks on some at bats, his strikeout rate actually isn't that high anymore. I don't know if like because he looks silly on some plate appearances, but it's like 25%, which that'll play for sure.
Yeah.
I'm a lot more optimistic about Jordan Walker since his K rate went from like 31% to 25%, because that was the problem. Like Tyler O'Neill, he's just inconsistent because he wasn't making contact enough. But if Walker can minimize his strikeouts as much as possible, then I think we might have a star on our hand.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That 25 does seem like the magic number for him. 25, 26, somewhere around there. And again, that constant adjusting to that breaking pitch. Because like you said, sometimes he's still flailing out at that slider out of the zone. That's something he's always going to struggle with. I think we can all agree on that at this point. It's just a matter of how he adjusts to that struggle, and that's been the major key this year is still hunting pitches. Adjusting better to the fastball, right? Because we saw them start to blow fastballs by him last year as he was crippled by that outside breaking pitch. He's adjusted to that. He's rotating on that better. And he's also fighting off that pitch that got him all of 2023, 24, and 25. So, yeah, look, I think you're right. I think the strikeout percentage is really the telltale. And we're also seeing him continue to evolve as a hitter, getting to more power, lowering that strikeout rate, and also continuing to drive the ball all over the field. So I'm excited about it. I do think it has staying power. And I know, to your point, Gabe, watching those line drive missiles and the home run derby from round one until the end with barely any wasted motion. It wasn't like he was trying to hit it. He was just swinging the bat. Was some of the most enjoyable, lighthearted baseball moments I've had as a Cardinal fan in years, I think.
Yeah.
Well, they don't ask you how, they ask you how many, right? And that was his ultimate goal, was just to hit as many as possible. It didn't matter how far it went as long as the number was greater than 11. And kind of to your point, Gabe, about the strikeout rate, yes, Jordan Walker's going to have some moments where he swings and misses, and like that's going to happen. But I wonder if as fans in general, at what point are we also able to kind of contextualize this conversation and also say that, you know what, that pitcher executed a good pitch and just simply got Jordan Walker out? How often are we capable of just being able to, to use Kyle's wording, to tip your cap to the pitcher, because the opposition is a major leaguer too, and they execute on their pitches, and sometimes they make the best hitters look, they say the best counter to good offense is good pitching. So good pitching beats good hitting always. So, sometimes it's just going to happen. But to be able to lean on and rely on the fact that, Jordan Walker, Ollie talks about this on the Gas House Gang, is like he has the cues to be able to tether himself back to. So if he starts getting outside of what he is supposed to do mechanically, they can go back and look at what he was doing to give him success, to allow him to, like Kyle said, to reset. So I think that has kind of been the major sticking point for him this season, and it's just been really refreshing to watch him be able to, like Kyle said, reset, and then also show the ability to make adjustments and improve the pitch selection to be able to do damage on against certain pitches that, frankly, last year, 2 years ago, he wasn't going to come anywhere close to touching or making contact with. From the current to the future, the Cardinals drafted Trevor Condon, Tegan Kuhns, and Rocco Maniscalco with their first 3 picks. What did you make of their draft, Kyle? It seems that across third-party outlets, they felt that the Cardinals came away with one, or maybe if not the best hauls in the 2026 cycle.
Yeah, it's just a group of exciting players. We were talking about it with Kareem a little bit on Wednesdays with Walton and Reis, but when you do all this draft prep, when you watch all these highlights and you watch all of collegiate baseball throughout the year, you tune in here and there, and there's so many games, and you're trying to stay up to date, and you're watching draft boards, and you're watching draft rankings, and you're trying to learn about players. You end up picking players, and you're like, man, I love this guy. Man, I love this guy. Man, I love this guy. And you become attached to players, and you like players, and then the Cardinals never draft any of those players. And it's not frustrating, because that's not the right way of putting it, but in your heart, you're like, man, I know that these players are good. And then you watch them perform well on other teams. And sure, the Cardinals prospects also perform well, but you have this allegiance to these players because you've been following them and watching them and liking them. Well, this year was, and this of course, influences my bias. This year, they happened to draft guys that I loved, that I personally had invested a lot of time and energy into and had highlighted as some of the better prospects in the draft. So to watch this all unfold, the Cardinals drafting players that I personally would have drafted and I personally would have highlighted, and to watch was just a really exciting thing to see the Cardinals. There's an evolution here in the Cardinals draft philosophy, and it aligns with the player development side, and they communicate so well together that you can see the hands shaking each other in the draft. And to watch the Cardinals kind of modernize their draft decisions based on the modernization of player development and what player development is asking for, and that to coincide with what we as fans are starting to really zone in on as an interesting and carrying tools for talent in an amateur level. And to watch it all come together in the 2026 draft, because that's exactly what happened. It was a perfect marriage of all of these things that you want as an analyst to come together. That's exactly what happened, and it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. So anyways, that's just to say that especially that day one in the beginning of day two, it could not have gone any better for the Cardinals, in my opinion, from both a quality and a quantity standpoint, for the draft as possible. It was exciting prospect after exciting prospect with very, very little waste or question mark or interest in there. Even the ones that were question marks, as you've come to learn more and more about them, you're like, oh, I get what they're doing here. It makes sense for keys for success at the major league level or the minor league level in modern baseball.
So since you were a big fan, and I read some, I'm mostly positive, but some differing stuff, I want to ask you to counter a couple of the negatives of two of the players that were highly acclaimed picks. Trevor Condon, I saw, this is probably a very minor opinion, but compared to the Pete Kozma pick a little bit, I would like you to react to that, because Pete Kozma was a high floor, mostly defense guy whose bat was a question mark. I know you're squinching your eyes there, Jake, but I get the comparison, even though I don't think it's right. And then with Rocco, I did see some talk where he just did not make enough contact at all in his last year. And what would your counters to that be with the people who were against those picks or didn't think they were as good?
Yeah, I will say Trevor Condon's an interesting one to me. I know Keith Law had him as his 41st best draft prospect, and I know nearly every other outlet had him in we'll just say the 10 to 18 range. Yeah. And for me, Trevor Condon is somewhere in between those two groups. One thing that I really like is both raw and in-game power. And I think when you're drafting a first-round draft pick, you have to have, of course, the bat-to-ball skills, bat speed, but you have to have in-game power there to feel really comfortable with your first-round pick, especially if it's the top 15 pick. And what people are going to do with Trevor Condon, the people who doubt Trevor Condon, and I am one of these people who kind of doubt Trevor Condon a little bit. I think he's going to be good. I think he has the bat speed and the strength to get to power, but I think most of those people will say, hey, look, this is a kid who could not hit home runs until his senior year in high school, and he only hit 9 in Georgia. Again, it was against really good competition, and he was still the Gatorade Player of the Year in Georgia, so that's worth mentioning as well. But the two things that people are going to say, they're going to say he's not hitting for power, and he's not going to be able to hit for power because of the way his hands work within his mechanics. He starts high, and he drops them, and he kind of swings the bat sometimes like it's a tennis racket on a backhand with two hands. And I think that's what we've seen out of prospects who swing the bat that way is it's hard for them to get to real power as they climb the minor league ladder. So when you draft someone like that, you hope that because he has, elite prep level bat to ball skills, that his bat to ball skills will carry him until he finally gets to power, until they can adjust his mechanics and get to power. But as we found with Ryan Mitchell, who is also kind of can he get to power? He has really good bat to ball skills. How does this all click? Will it all click as you try to implement one without sacrificing the other? So I think that would be that. My counter to that would be this kid's going to hit one way or the other. I don't know if the power will come or not, but it's not ever going to dip below he's not ever going to be like a 220, 300, 220 batting average, 300 on base percentage. He makes smarter swing decisions than that. He has better bat to ball skills than that. Even though he does have, everybody talks about his motor and his defensive skills and his speed and all that and his work ethic. All that stuff will play into it. Not to say Pete Kozma didn't have that, but I think that would be the complaint why you would say that you would question that. And also I would say as a counter to that, look, the kid's going to hit no matter what happens. And that's something you can't guarantee with a lot of these picks, especially on the prep level in the first round. And then with Rocco, I don't know how to counter the Rocco thing other than to say, watching him is a treat. And, I've talked to people who scout the prep ranks, and, what I will tell people is when you're talking about somebody who reclassified from the 2027 class to the 2026 class, who's the youngest kid drafted in any draft in the history of drafts, there's rawness there that you just have to take into account. And you don't know how the rawness is going to polish. What you hope is that they can work hard and that they take to the teachings of the organization that drafts him. And by every indication, that's what Rocco Maniscalco is going to be able to do. But when you talk to these guys who have watched him play, they would have told you that, if he wouldn't have reclassified, he'd probably be in line to be a top 3 pick in the 2027 draft, that he might have been the first overall pick in the 2027 draft. And all it would have taken was just a little adjusting, because while his swing can get a little long, it's not so long and it's not so unorthodox for a 17-year-old to overcome it in one season. And I think the Cardinals will allow him, working with the Cardinals will allow him to cut that distance pretty markedly. So again, I cannot say to those people who question Rocco Maniscalco and his bat how it'll perform at the major league level. I don't have the raw data or anything to prove. What I can tell you is that there is real raw power in there. He is a true athlete who's going to stick it short and who moves around exceedingly well and has explosive levers and explosive motions. And I believe, because of how dedicated he is to the sport, how he's driven to be as good as he can be, that within a year or two, we start to see those question marks that are his batted ball profile and his contact rates start to level out as a 19-year-old at Palm Beach, and he's taking that step to be a top 100 prospect. But it is a gamble. They're going to give him between my guess is between $3.75 and $4.1 million for a bonus to sign as a 50th overall pick. And it is very much a gamble that will take longer to pay off than probably any other draft pick that the Cardinals made in 2026.
You show me a person who doubts a 17-year-old's ability to become something of any type of high quality or caliber, and I'll show you a fool. Anybody who's sitting here telling you they know exactly what a 17-year-old is ever going to become is foolish. And so that's why I squinted my eyes, because it's like, I don't know how you can make any definitive determination about a raw 17, like Kyle said, one of the youngest player ever drafted. There is so much runway in front of him, and on top of that, I had Nate Rasmussen on last week. He does really great work over at Overslot. If you guys haven't checked that episode out, go check that out, because Nate's fantastic, always great with the information. He compared Maniscalco to Billy Carlson, who was drafted last year by the White Sox. And so I know they're a little bit more raw in the hitting ability than what Billy Carlson's capable or has already shown capabilities of. But the defensive ability and acumen, he feels they're on similar planes. And to say that you might have potentially gotten a guy at 50 that was a top 10 pick the year before would be really great value. Same thing with Trevor Condon. He comped, and I know, Kyle, how you are about comps, but I'm just throwing this out there. He comped Trevor Condon to somewhat of a Max Clark type player. He didn't see PCA. He didn't really get the Lenny Dykstra of it all, but he saw a lot of Max Clark in Trevor Condon. So, again, a top 5 pick you're getting at 13. There's really good value there if they are comparable players, if they wind up on a similar trajectory. All of that being said, nothing is for sure. Nothing is ever for sure predictive, but to know that the Cardinals targeted players with the same types of potential skill sets as those types of top 10 picks, I don't know how you can be anything but just excited and enthusiastic about what the future could potentially hold for the Cardinals and this draft class that they brought in. Kyle, I did want to jump to one other player the Cardinals drafted really quickly, one that's super fascinating to me. 5th round pick Cal Randall out of UCLA. This dude has the best fastball in the entire draft. The Cardinals got him in the 5th round, and it's a big, almost 80 grade fastball. I would be comfortable putting an 80 on the fastball, but he has no secondaries whatsoever to speak of. He kind of plays with a changeup. It's a usable pitch. You don't know how it's probably not gonna work that great against higher level competition. They're just gonna sit the fastball and do the best they can with it. I talked a little bit about this with Nate, and I've also been listening to like Baseball America and MLB Pipeline, and they kind of firmly believe that this is a reliever-only profile. I still kind of wonder if this is the guy, kind of like Tanner Franklin last year, that they try to at least see what it looks like as a starter and to move forward with it from there, see if they can develop a quality secondary to go along with that big fastball. What do you see from Cal Randall, and do you think that there is starter potential in there?
Yeah, 100% I do, and I don't think the Cardinals would have drafted him with their 5th round pick if they didn't think that they would at least give it a runway. Because of how dynamic that fastball is, he's always going to get a chance to be in the bullpen really quick. That's it. But one way or the other, to be a bullpen piece at the major league level, he's going to need something else. The Cardinals are going to develop him as a starter. That is a fact. It doesn't mean that when he makes his debut in the organization that it won't be out of the bullpen or something like that, but the plan is to develop him as a starter. Now, I've seen a lot of really smart people that I agree with that say what he needs to do is do the Lance Lynn focus on fastballs, right? Do a sinker, 4-seam, cutter, and start there and see where it goes from there. And I think that is a great way to start. Personally, the changeup, I would like to see him develop it as little as possible. I think that it's not a bad thing to have in his pocket against lefties to continue to work on. But to me, like, you shelf that pitch as much as you feel comfortable doing. Really, his secondary offering that I'm most interested in is this little cut slider that he has. It's really just a cutter, but sometimes he throws it with a little extra juice and it moves a little bit more east to west. I think that's where you start. I don't know if you start with the sinker right away, but you go fastball cutter and you continue to augment him, teach him how to throw, how to grip it and rip it so that it's a traditional gyro slider and can also be a cutter. I think you start there and you backpedal from there. You build from there, without knowing how comfortable he is gripping baseballs, or how his arm's going to maintain throwing these different pitches. I can't really say for sure, but for me, if I'm building him and I'm building him slow and I'm trying to take it easy and get him on a starter's repertoire, I'm starting with how do I augment the pitch that he already throws, which is a cuttery slider, and how do I make that work for me, and then build on from there, because I think that's the best way to do it. But yeah, look, I think that I do think 100% that, and I know 100% that they're going to start with the intent of building him up as a starter, because there's more value there. And you know what? If it doesn't click, then hopefully you've developed a secondary pitch that's as good or at least manageable as that primary elite fastball, so that he can have success at the major league level.
Can you share some thoughts on Tegan Kuhns, who, despite being drafted from Tennessee, is, from what I understand, not the same as Liam Doyle and Tanner Franklin? Like, they're different type of prospects.
Yeah. So if you were to marry old Cardinals scouting with new Cardinals scouting, you would have Tegan Kuhns. He's a strike thrower who throws from that low launch angle that the Cardinals have highlighted. He has a good fastball that actually, I think most scouts that have actually watched him will tell you that the fastball might actually be the question mark here, even though it plays well and it has traits that suggest that it would be like a 60 grade fastball or something like that. But really what I'm encouraged by is all the scouts say that his slider is his best secondary offering, and I don't think you can argue that. But what he did as he went down as the season progressed for Tennessee is he started throwing his curveball more, and that made his slider work better, and his curveball was getting better and better and better and better and better. And sure, sometimes he'd hang it and it get banged. Sometimes that just happens. But I've watched these two off-speed pitches develop into actionable developmental pitches that could help carry him to the major leagues, and he commands it all pretty well. The fastball, what gets interesting with the fastball, even though it measures well and it has the potential to be a plus pitch, is he uses it kind of weird. And I'm anxious to see how the Cardinals supplement this, how they change it. But a lot of times when you watch him in a start, he uses this fastball, which plays really well up in the zone, low in the zone. He kind of peppers it low in the zone, low in the zone, low in the zone. And then as the game works on, it goes higher and higher and higher and higher in the zone, helping it play up as he fatigues out a little bit. So I cannot wait to see how that augments. If the Cardinals just say, hey, look, you got to use this thing up in the zone from the start of the game until the end, and if that helps it play up. But it is still susceptible to a little bit of damage, more so than fastballs that measure similarly from similar angles. But yeah, again, Tegan Kuhn's is fun because, in some ways this is the Michael Wacha strike throwing profile with the stuff of the modern ask of the development and scouting side. So this is not Tanner Franklin. He's going to get to the majors quicker than that. He has better command than that. This is not Liam Doyle, where you're questioning some of the off-speed offerings, but his fastball is going to carry him. He's some amalgamation of old and new, and that gets me excited as somebody who really appreciates both the old technique and the new technique.
Is he targeted for Peoria, would you say, or even Springfield maybe?
So I would suspect that when we see him in 2027 that he will be in Peoria. That would be my guess, is that will be his first landing spot.
To kind of go back to the Cal Randall of it all real quick, you talked about a cutter and a slider, commonly referred to in baseball as a slutter. I don't think there is a more Kyle Reis affectionately titled type of pitch. I just also want to get into Kyle. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your time. Again, for anybody out there who doesn't already, if they've been living under a rock, where can they go and find you? Where can they follow your stuff at? Let us know that real quick.
Yeah, Jake, you know how I do this. I prefer that you don't follow me. What I would ask you to do is, in response, or support me. Don't support me. I'm not really interested. But Brian Walton does an amazing work over at the Cardinal Nation. And of course, I'm on the podcast with him Wednesdays with Walton and Reis. Support that, because Brian is a true professional who does amazing work. And then just, again, if one last little cap tip to our friends over at Birds on the Farm, Kareem and Aiden, Redbird Farmhand, those guys do amazing work. Follow them, and don't waste your time on me. Jake, are you trying to end this episode? Can I ask?
We're at 45 minutes, so we've had a lot of listeners ask us to keep it under 45 minutes, so.
No problem. Can I just say one thing before we sign off? As we talk about the draft, I just want to say that my favorite prospect, my favorite of all the draft picks, was D. Kennedy, the 4th rounder out of K-State. He is my favorite. He's a great dude, a fun dude. Of course, much has been made about the LASIK surgery of it all. But I think there's a chance that when we look back at this draft, he's the first one to make the majors. And I just think he's a real special talent. And I don't know how it's going to work because, he has contact issues, even though he makes really great swing decisions. But he's run into some pop, and I love the way this infielder plays the game. And just wanted to give a cap tip to my favorite draft prospect in this draft, D. Kennedy.
And because Kyle deflected there, I'm going to tell you where you can all go follow him at Kyler416 on Twitter. He thought he was going to get away with it, but I didn't allow him to. You can also go listen to all of his great work on Wednesdays with Walton and Reis at thecardinalnation.com. You can find them on YouTube, Spotify, and all your listening platforms. For Gabe Simons, my name is Jake Wood. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Viva El Birdos podcast. Don't forget to rate and review and hit that subscribe button so you're notified every Monday morning at 6 a.m. Whenever our newest episodes are released. We'll talk to you all next week and bring you more great Cardinals content. Have a great day, St. Louis, and let's go Cards.